Hello again, and welcome to another episode of Stories from Real Life. I'm your host, Melvin E. Edwards. Before we begin, I have some news for you. This show was just named Best Male Hosted Podcast for 2026 by the American Writing Awards. Thank you to everyone who listens and to our wonderful guests for always being open to sharing their stories. That's why we're here, to hear their stories, not mine. So this week's awesome guest is Mark Firehammer, who is the founder of the Creative Humanity Alliance. He joins us to unpack emotional health, sustainable success, and why feeling better may matter more than performing better. So Mark joins us from Massachusetts. Mark, welcome to Stories from Real Life.
Thank you, Melvin. I appreciate that intro. And congratulations on being named Best Male Hosted Podcast. That's a big deal.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I was pretty excited. I just found out last night. I'm pretty excited.
That's why, even though we don't know each other yet, that explains the extra smile on your face.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited today. So I'm also excited because you're from Massachusetts, and I've heard some interesting things about Massachusetts drivers. Can you confirm or deny what they say about Massachusetts drivers?
I guarantee you I know exactly what you're referring to.
Sure
and it's not a good quality. And can I tell a little story about driving?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. I traveled extensively for years. I toured full time at the end of my music career. Never went home. I was on the road for 5 years. So I'm a very conservative and relaxed driver. And here in Massachusetts, I set the cruise control to always go the speed limit. And the Massachusetts drivers are so angry with me for going the speed limit. They're literally right on my tail, and you can see them in the rear view mirror throwing up their hands and shaking their head. I'm like, wow, these people just need to chill out. So
it's
everything
like
you heard, if
that's yeah, I'm in Texas, and it's become that way down here too.
Well, given the topic of our discussion, Melvin, I think it's a reflection of kind of the velocitization of human beings that just keeps getting worse and worse. In our minds, many people are already where they're going in their mind. And that's, bumper to bumper, even though the science and rationality says you're not going to get there any quicker. Just chill out, go with the flow. You'll get there at the same time. But they can't do that because in their mind, they're already there. I got to get there. Seinfeld had a great episode in the 90s that made fun of that.
All right, so let's talk about some different aspects of your life. So your fiction as a writer, you write under the name J.W. Kindblue, and you explore cultural belonging and creative truth. So I think Firehammer is the coolest name ever. So why would you use a pen name instead of your real name?
Oh, I'm so glad that you asked, because it's so meaningful to me, which you're about to learn why, that I made that decision. In that, as a child, what I was born as, I never felt like a firehammer. I was little. I was not powerful physically. They called me the drenched rat through most of my childhood because I, barely weighed 100 pounds even in high school. So even though I thought the name would look cool on a football jersey, I never was big enough to play. And my dad wasn't a bad man, but he was emotionally unavailable. He fought in the war and his father killed himself. Lots of trauma there. So I never really knew my father intimately. He was there. He provided for the family. So that's another reason why I didn't feel like a firehammer. When I started writing music in the 80s, it wasn't aggressive music. It was storytelling. It was cultural bardism, right? Observing, thinking through, making observations, telling stories. So when my first album came out in 1996, it was a full production album with a band, but it still wasn't aggressive at all. And when I went into the record stores, my record alphabetically was between Firehouse, which was a metal band, and some other fire thing. And I did not belong. And at the time, it annoyed me a little bit, but I didn't think of it in terms I didn't belong. But in hindsight, now that I'm in my 60s, it was almost a metaphor for a great deal about who I was and what I chose to not become was important as what I chose to stay as. The Firehammer was never a fit. And so Kind Bloom, fast forward now, Kind Bloom was my mother's ancestral name from Sweden. And I find it very interesting that my mom and my dad both had a compound last name, Firehammer, Kind Bloom. And of course, they were both Americanized. Firehammer was German, so it would have been Feuerhammer. And Kind Bloom was Kindblum, and it had a little umlaut or something over the U. So it turned into Kind Bloom in America. And for me, given my body of work, when you look at it, there's a thread that runs through the very first line I wrote when I was, 6 or 7 years old, to the very last song that I wrote in 2025. There's a common thread through all of it, through almost 60 years of writing. And Kind Bloom resonates deeply, energetically, with the gentleness and the observational nature of my work in general. So I'm glad you asked.
That is really fascinating. Really fascinating. So what do you think traditional storytelling sometimes misses that modern readers are looking for?
Yeah, that's a great question. When you say traditional, qualify that. Traditional, do you mean like really traditional, like before civilization storytelling, or more?
Probably fairly contemporary, I would say.
Okay. All right. That makes it a much more interesting question. I'm glad I asked. So, yeah, for me, what's missing is, and my second book, which we'll probably talk about, addresses this. It's a nonfiction. Is that most of the storytelling in our culture today, I've found, and I've been an avid reader for 60 some years, is it's writing to be seen, especially if it's fiction. It's writing for performance. It's writing for the marketplace. It's typically more of a mirror for society than it is a lantern. And what they miss is the humanity of who we are as a species, right? That's my thing. I came into this world as recognizing I'm a human being. And I knew early on that the legacy of my genetic line is millions of years old. And civilization is an abstraction layer, a couple, 10,000 years or so. So the storytelling for me is really missing the wisdom that the wise men of the early tribes had, where the information was passed along that was important, that was learned experience, not installed knowledge and wisdom. Like today in civilization, we install our belief systems. I think storytelling really misses that. And when you look around, the way human beings seem to be in a really constant state of competition nowadays, the storytelling is supporting that rather than showing an alternative to that. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. It does make sense.
Yeah. And I referred earlier to the analogy of lantern or mirror. There's a saying, life imitates art, right? Life imitates art, or is it art imitating life? And having been in the music business starting in the 80s, one of the things that I learned from the executives in the music business was they're only interested in creating records when they're in charge that the public sees a reflection of themselves in, rather than a song that might make them go, oh, that's a beautiful point of view that I never really considered before. And to make it even worse, now that we're in 2026, I came up in the music business when like Pearl Jam was getting famous in the early 90s. And now much of pop storytelling is telling a story that shows characters that are in a worse place than you are. So it's like, wow, at least my life is better than that. So that's mirror work and not lantern work. And lantern work never sells. I mean, look at my body of work. I've released 7 albums, 2 books, and I'm not a household name. I'm not famous, but I wasn't supposed to be. That wasn't the plan. I'm leaving a legacy of content that tells a story of what is another option to choose as a member of the human race, 2 million years of biological history rather than the civilized person trying to compete with the person next to them, and not everyone can win. But that competition turns into some really ugly stuff. Just watch the news, you know.
Yeah,
You can see it all
absolutely.
around us. I laugh
Absolutely.
only because the alternative is to cry.
Yes. Yeah, let's not cry. Let's tell stories to guide, shine some light to guide people to the path, the right path.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So, how do you balance allegory with emotional authenticity in your fiction?
Well, that's another great question, Melvin. Now I know why you're number one in male hosted podcasts. It was really easy for me because even though the book falls in the category of allegory, it's 40 years of my own observational and lived experience put into the words of a character that I needed to create. So the emotional authenticity was easy because now that I'm 63, if I were to die tomorrow and someone would say, let's look at the body of work, they would see from 4 years old when there's a record of me producing something to my latest works in my 60s, there's an authentic emotional constant through all of it, which was my decision early on. I mean, I came to that honesty because of spring flowers. I was born in Leominster, Massachusetts, and early on, of course, being a child, I haven't been indoctrinated into any ideologies as a child. I'm part of this world. And I would get up in the springtime early in the morning. My parents, it always upset them because I wouldn't dress in their minds appropriately. And I would go out and I would sit in the yard. I'd set my butt down on a pile of snow and I would just wait and stare at the ground where I knew a tulip would come up. I thought at that age that they wouldn't come up if I wasn't there with them,
Mm.
that we were connected in a way that we needed each other. Well, at 4 years old, I didn't understand what I was doing. But now in my 60s, I know that that's co-regulation, something that human beings have sort of abandoned. We don't even recognize it unless you're in the field of, psychology and, emotional well-being. I learned co-regulation from flowers and animals, worms, birds, ducks, you name it. My parents didn't allow us to have pets until I was maybe 11 or 12. We had moved to Florida in 69. And so, but as before that, I made pets out of earthworms and birds and neighborhood dogs and cats and the tulips. So for me, I've been a part of the fabric of life for my entire life. I perceive myself as a thread in that tapestry. And by the time I got to 10 or 12, I was reading books like The Source by James Michener and Jonathan Livingston Seagull. And that confirmed my childhood ideation of being a part of life and not being the tailor of the fabric. And if you look at civilization, the civilization is positioned as this is all for us, depending on your ideology, and that we just use it as a source of resources for humans and humans alone, much to the detriment of tens of thousands, millions of species, and the climate and all that. We won't get deeply into that. But did I answer your question
Yes.
sufficiently?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So, what first led you towards the concept of fieldness?
Oh, wow, interesting. We're going to cover all the bases. Yeah, I was the youngest of three, and my family was not sporty people. We didn't play game. We didn't play sports. We didn't run. We didn't pump iron. We didn't do any of that. So I grew up as the youngest, of course, being really active. I was like all human beings. When you're active, you don't need to go to the gym. A gym is a replacement for working. I'm sorry, for just a lifestyle that keeps you healthy. So as I got older, I realized that even into my 40s, I didn't need the gym because as a touring musician, you're lifting speakers, 100-pound speakers, you're putting them on stands, you're carrying the equipment, you're loading and unloading the van, and and I lived outdoors during my touring years. So when I was only working 2 to 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. The rest of the time I was exploring the world. So there's a lot of hiking and still no running, no climbing, no lifting weights. But when I got into my 50s, 10 years out of being on tour, I began to become aware of the loss of physical capacity due to that I wasn't using my body anymore, not in enough ways that kept it moving right. So now getting back to my parents, I watched my parents fall apart in their old age. They're both gone now, and both of them spent their final years in hospital beds, unable to even walk. And every penny that they had saved, and they did pretty well. We were middle class. We weren't wealthy people by any means, but literally every dime and then some was spent trying to recover some semblance of well-being. And it was an epic failure because they died in the hospital bed. So in my 50s, I said, okay, this is not going to happen to me because now I feel it. No coincidences in life. No coincidence, Melvin. I was partnered with this woman. I still am, Katrina Hawley. If you look her up, she's pretty well known. She's a master of physiology. She owns a Pilates studio. She's a teacher trainer for an international organization. She's on the staff at the School of Dance at University of Hartford as well. So I'm partnered with her, and she knows everything there is to know about the body. So here I am in my early 50s feeling, I call it the oof. Can you relate, Melvin? Oof.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You bend over to pet the cat and you go, oof. And if you're with a friend and your friend does it, you say, are you okay? And you say, oh yeah, I'm just getting old. I'm just getting old. Mm-hmm. I refused to accept that I was just getting old because I saw other people retaining their mobility, but doing it in a way that I was not comfortable with. An hour at the gym every day running. It's like, I don't need superhuman strength. I need mobility. And Katrina, being in the Pilates field and a former dancer, she knew exactly what I was after. So I followed her around like a hungry little child wanting to learn. And I literally learned what you have to do for the 7 areas of the body practically, not gym-wise, but what do you practically need to do to make sure that the feet and ankles, the lower legs, the upper legs, the hips, the spine, the neck and shoulders, and then the arms, what do you have to use them for? What range of motion, load or not load, what do you have to do to make sure that the mobility and the use of that part never slips away from you? Wrote it all down, ran it through her. It took probably 4 years of iterating. And the end result was Feelness, which is a prescriptive movement modality that you do 10 minutes a day. And the reason why you do it is not because of what you see in the mirror, right? I'm sure you see it, the way they advertise fitness. They're superhuman. And I'm like, why do you need that kind of strength? But it's all about the way they look. I want people to see me as sexy. I want people to see me as, the top. I'm the best. It is the competition thing again. And so Feelness is triggered by the oof. And you can't see it. Although you see the 3 frames behind me to my right?
Yes.
That is a record of 2023. I had 5 out of 9 oofs. 5 out of 9 areas of my body were giving me a slight warning. Danger, Will Robinson. I like to use the light on the dashboard. Check engine. Check engine. What does that mean? So 5 out of 9 were giving me complaint. So Feelness is really nothing more than a prescription of combinations of 7 simple movements that you'll see them at the gym, but you'll see them in extreme forms. If your ankles are hurting, you simply follow the prescription for ankle pain, and you do for 10 minutes the 7 movements for the ankles, and you're done. You might do it in the morning and the evening. Well, long story short, by February of 2024, so 8 months, doing less than 30 minutes a day. It started out 10, 10, and 10, and ended with 10 and 10. I had restored all of the 5 complaints of my body to no complaints at all. And I'm now 63, and I haven't had to continue the 10 minutes because I changed my lifestyle so that those movements were then built into the lifestyle. So feelness doesn't end up being something that you're beholden to for the rest of your life, like the gym is. If you build superhuman strength and ripped abs, you can't keep those unless you keep doing the work. With feelness, you can keep what you recover as long as you then continue to institute the simple prescriptive movements that maintain your body. People watch me get up and down from the floor, and they're like, how in the world can you do that at 63? 63 is not that old, but I know people in their 50s that can't get down onto the floor to play with their grandkids or the pets without using their hands or looking like it's a struggle or sounding like it's a struggle.
Wow. So that's a physical well-being. So how do most people misunderstand emotional well-being?
Yeah, I think this is my opinion, Melvin. But a life of hindsight and watching my own family and peers, I think supports my hypothesis. Is that if you buy into things that are outside of you as a human being, as the source of what will bring you happiness, right? If you buy into, you have to achieve that, have that, do that, be that, and you are none of those things until you achieve them, have them, buy them, do them, right? That's the trap in my experience. Everyone in my family got on that train, got to get the education, got to get the job. I got to be respected by my neighbor. I got to have more than my neighbor. We try so hard to keep up with the Joneses, right? Keeping up with the Joneses, I mentioned in one of my songs. The key for me for emotional well-being is don't ever buy into that. Remember what inspired you as a child, and don't ever stop being inspired by that, because that's who you really are. That's what your entity this time around in this life, depending on how you look at whether there's more than one chance at life. If you stay true to who you are by not forgetting what you were when you were born, you'll never be chasing some ideal only to find out at the end of the race that, oops, that wasn't what I was supposed to be doing. Some of my best friends got into we're in our 60s now, and they all got the midlife crisis. Oh no, who am I? Right? Who am I? I've been working all these years. I don't know why I'm here. I don't know what my purpose is. And there's another reason why retirement doesn't work for some people is they're defined by what they do. As soon as you stop doing what you did for 30, 40 years, you don't have anything to live for. There's no purpose. So I know this is a long answer, but if you find your purpose in your childhood curiosity, that stays with you with your entire life, because that's who you were when you were born. And that's exactly what I've done. I've never let go of the 4-year-old that I was born at. I'm a 63-year-old 4-year-old, Melvin.
That's interesting. That's cool. So if somebody is feeling the way you just described, they're stuck or they're sort of burned out, what's a realistic step towards changing that sort of mentality?
Yeah. Well, I walk into the answer to that question with caution. My second book, The Lens That Changes Everything, it's not for sale, but it's available for free on the Creative Humanity website. All you have to do is just register and download it. There's a chapter in there called The Self-Help Loop. And what I analyze is that self-help is rarely the answer, because it's based upon the idea that there's something wrong with you, right? And we're getting back to my lived philosophy of, if you know who you are and you just spend your life being the best you can at that, rather than listening to your mom and your dad and your teachers in Sunday school or whatever say, what are you going to be when you grow up, right? What are you going to be when you grow up? There's an implication in that you aren't anything already, right? So the advice that I give is not look for the next modality, the next method to fix what's wrong with you. It's to return to the things that made you happy, made you whole, made you emotionally well, sustained that when you were young. And that lasted until you stopped doing it. In fact, if you don't mind, I want to read just a fragment of a lyric. And this is actually, it's a better answer to your question than anything that I could ever say, Melvin. In 1997, I was coming to 1998, actually. I was coming to the end of my tour, and I was in a coffee house in the Carolinas. And this is actually verbatim written in my fiction, The Echo and the Voice. Jonas Wilder tells this same story. And I'd been writing songs this whole journey. And I got into this coffee house. There's maybe 15, 12 or 15 people there. Small town in the Carolinas. And a man in his 50s, his wife and their 2 teenage daughters was there. And it was just another Friday night at the local coffee house. There's no alcohol or anything. And really a lovely place for a guy like me to tell stories and sing songs. So I start playing these songs, and I had begun starting to play them in a specific order because by now I was 40. And I knew that I was onto something with the thread that ran through all my music. So I started to play this one song, and I noticed the man lean in ever so subtly. And I'd learned to watch for that as a street performer in New York in the 80s, that your job is to get a stranger to pay attention to you. They don't care who you are. Sometimes they're annoyed that you're there. But in this case, he leaned in. So I paid attention to that. And then I told a little tiny story to set up the second song. I did another song. And at that point, he stopped engaging with his wife and his daughters. And they've been happily chatting with themselves. By the third song in the series, he was literally moved forward, hanging on every word that I said. And long story short, Melvin, he sent his family home at the end of the night, and he hung out with me for about 2 hours. And it's the kind of place that, you know, everybody knows everybody. And the owners left. They left us there, and they just gave him the key. And he said, oh, yeah, you know, drop it in your mailbox on the way home. I just love that stuff. So we chatted for a while, and he started asking me a lot of questions about what, you know, why did you write those songs? How do you know these things? And we were pen pals for 20 years. And so let me read a song that I wrote in 2004, 5 years after I had met him. At the end of the song, okay, it starts out, he says, once upon a time when on the road was home, I met a man who said he saw something he'd never known that was hidden in a song I'd played not long before. He said, I heard it and my jaw about dropped down to the floor. So fast forward. By the end of the song, he said to me, I'm not free at all. Not for a minute. I've been running from my fear, and I'm trapped in it. I've done what they expect of me, my family and society, instead of listening to that voice I once heard inside of me. How can I tell my 2 young daughters and my wife of 20 years that much of what I've done has been driven by my deepest fears, that I'm not free at all? He left that night, and he had a conversation with his kids, and he came clean. He's like, you know, everybody envies me. They admire me for all I've done. And at one point he says to me, and I wrote this song, it was like a gift from him. He says, I've done what they expect of me, my family and society, instead of listening to the voice once heard. Say, okay, I wrote that already. 20 years later, he's told his kids, he's told his wife, he's made choices in his life. He didn't abandon anything. He just started saying no to what was being asked of him that was too much. He still thrived. But now he was happy. And he had children who he could look in the eye knowing that he wasn't sending them on the same path that he'd been on, living up to someone else's expectations. And it's such a powerful moment for a guy who said, someday I'm going to change the world with a song. And what I realized was it wasn't going to happen with a song, but it could happen with a body of work that uniformly and consistently says the same thing. Be what you were born as and not what someone else tells you to do. The last verse, he says, now I stand free and tall each and every moment. I live my wildest dreams because I found myself in dreams. Now, it doesn't seem strange to see what a lot of folks say to me, that they admire all I am. Some wish they could be like me. I tell them that they can. It starts with letting go of fear. Do the things that please you most and bless who happens to be near. That's
Nice.
a big takeaway right there, because that's exactly what he did. And did I change the world? No. Did my presence on this earth change his life and his children's life and his grandchildren's life? Probably so, because that's the way we learn in this fast-paced world, by the example set by those that came before us. So I'm grateful to continue this work, and the Creative Humanity Alliance is exactly that. It's just a continuation of what I started when I was 4.
Nice. So, along those lines, what does current stress or current research say about stress, recovery, and longevity? And how do those
No.
factors? How is modern hustle culture incorporated into those kind of stressful situations?
Yeah, I can't speak to the research. All I can speak to is what I see, and then the difference in what I experience. I know it's bad. I mean, it's all about competition. When you look at it, 2 million years we existed as organisms that needed one another, and we co-regulated. Do you understand the concept of co-regulation?
Yes, vaguely, but I do
Yeah.
understand it.
Yeah, I'll just give a tiny little scenario. If there's a room of 10 people and I walk in and I'm severely agitated, I'm angry, I'm loud, I'm upset. If you had monitors on everyone in the room, their blood pressure would go up a little bit. But then they would help me to dial it back down. And that's a biologic mechanism that requires us to recognize that we are not single units in a competitive system. We are now, but that's a choice. We don't have to just accept that. If we accept that we are actually all connected invisibly through this nervous energy, and that we are responsible for each other's well-being, it then becomes almost impossible to see the other that we're suffering from right now. I mean, not to get into U.S. politics, but the U.S. politics is othering all day, every day, other. Be afraid of them, be afraid of them. The reality is that we're all 99.9% exactly the same. We're all human beings. The labels don't matter. We have a 2 million year biological legacy. So I know it's not the answer to the question you asked, but hustle culture is a continuation of competition. Not every hustler is going to win. Some of them are going to lose. And to kind of thread it back to the self-help piece, self-help works until it doesn't. And when it doesn't, what we say to ourselves about it, we don't blame the method. We blame ourselves, right? But the truth is, we're all experiencing our biology, 2 million years old, coming into direct collision with a demand set, a civilized demand set that's highly competitive, that are incompatible. And until we do what my friend with his family did and recognize the limits of that biology, we're going to be emotionally unwell. We're going to be in a constant loop of trauma recovery. When effort is what's required to feel better, you know you're on the right path, because the human biology is very wise. Another piece of why we created Feelness. In the book, I say, the body is the first source of truth. The body is always going to tell you what you need to know. And when I feel anxiety, which I don't, but when you see people feeling anxiety, that's being misinterpreted. It's being interpreted as, I'm anxious because I'm not living up to my parents' expectations, or I'm going to fail that test on Saturday, or I'm not going to get the promotion John is, right? Anxiety is not meant to be telling us that. Anxiety is saying, hey, your biology here, your check engine light is on. You need to relax, and let your body get into a rhythm, because you can't go nonstop the way you're trying to do. Anxiety solves itself when you stop competing. And I say that with confidence because in my 63 years, Melvin, I've had 10 minutes of prolonged, what I would call anxiety. And the reason I got over it so quickly is I was with people who co-regulated me out of it. And they showed me, you've got nothing to be anxious about. And it never happened again. Why? Because I never bought into the competition. I've never competed. I never will. And because I'm really good at being me, I don't have a pile of money, but I don't need a pile of money. All my needs are being met. My emotional needs are being met. My physical needs are being met. My relationship are all strong and supportive. And that's the key. Pay attention to your body. Don't chase well-being from an external source. And it's a practice. You have to do it a little bit at a time. But the first thing you've got to recognize is that your biology has limits. That's never going to change. Not in our lifetime, anyway.
So, how has technology changed the way we relate to our bodies and emotions?
Yeah, that's a good question. It can be used for us or against us, right? A good example of biology being used against us. I love civilization. Don't get me wrong. I'm not one of those guys that says abandon civilization. It's bad. We're supposed to be sitting around the fire. No, that's not it at all. We can respect our biology and still benefit from what we very creative and imaginative species of human have come up with. So technology, medical technology, when we don't ignore it, keeps us safe from certain diseases. It allows us to monitor. This is a good and a bad. The glucose, the diabetes patches, and then the device, right? In a way, it's good to know that, but it's also enables you to only manage your diabetes instead of do the other things that you might do to really reduce the diabetes. Katrina's in the middle of a big project right now that is all about this particular thing. Is what do we do? Accept the medical marvel to get through, or do we understand what our biology is actually saying and do more job fixing it than just covering the symptom? So that's a good and a bad. I can monitor my glucose if I'm diabetic, but it might enable me. That's a choice. Another example of technology, good or bad, would be AI. Some people are flipping out about AI. I don't even refer to it as AI. I call it a large language model, which is exactly what it is. There's nothing smart about it. It's just got a lot of information. And how it's being used against us is it's being used to lie. And it's so convincingly lying that it becomes easy to then demonize it because it can be used to lie, as if it's lying. It's not lying. The humans using it are lying. On the other hand, when you're using a large language model for what it's really for good, and I'm a guy that's been an early adopter of everything, Melvin. I got the first word processor when I was 14. I had a typewriter when I was 10, the IBM Selectric. I had a personal computer in 1989. I've always adopted. I love large language models, but I don't let them do work for me. I let them help me do the work that I already do. In fact, both of let me give you the best example. The album that was released with the echo in the voice is in the voice of Jonas Wilder, the main character. And I wrote all the songs between 1984 and 1990 or 2002. Before most of the internet existed, before AI existed. So the songs were written. But I needed, because it was an allegory, it was fiction, I needed to record them in a voice of a younger man than me. And I needed that voice to be timeless, like the character in the book. He will never age. He's Jonas Wilder. I used AI to iterate the sound that I wanted. Very, very organized approach. It didn't write the songs for me. They were already written, which is a perfect example of how AI can be used for good. If you're really good at something, AI can organize it for you in a myriad and multitude of ways that you couldn't imagine. And as a songwriter in my 60s, I'd written 100 songs and only recorded 13, right? So I'm like, okay, so some of these songs I was never going to record anyway because that song is not me. I wrote it for someone else to sing it. And now all of a sudden in 2025, I had the tools to do that. Any song that I wrote that I hear in my head in a certain voice, male, female, young, old, hard, soft, high, low, gravelly, clear, I could do that. And I could be in full control of the output. The album is quite remarkable from that point of view. And it's not lying to anyone. It's taking really meaningful content. And if you listen to that album from beginning to end in the order, you have the same experience potential as that man in the coffee house. So that's a perfect example of technology is either friend or foe, but the foe is not the tech, it's the user of the tech. Does that make sense?
I agree with that 100%. If you don't mind, I have a story
Yeah.
relating very similar to that.
Oh, please.
I recently finished writing my first novel. It's called Nuremberg, Mississippi, and it'll be released in May. I used AI as a research assistant because I drew parallels between the Nuremberg trials in the 1940s in Germany and the Jim Crow South in America in the 1960s. And I used it to find out some slang terms people might have used during those times. What were some names of streets or names of buildings in those areas, so I could make it authentic. I asked it the questions that I wanted the answers to. I didn't just ask it, what should I do here? Very specific questions, and it saved me so much time. So much time. I love researching, but I like saving time too.
Beautiful. I'll buy the book when it comes out. I'm very excited to know that how you came to it, and the subject matter is very timely as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We can talk about that more after we finish recording here, and I just have a few more questions left, and we'll be done. What are some trends in wellness that excite you, and what are some that might concern you?
Yeah. Well, the trend that excites me, you see them in New Zealand and Australia. They're way ahead of us in terms of returning wisdom to the body and away from the gods that are the doctors. We got a real problem with that in the West here in the United States. What's the name of the program? I can't remember the name, but in a nutshell, that's very exciting that they're teaching in med school. Oh, it's starting to come back to me. They're teaching in med school something that they're not doing in the United States. They're teaching them functional movement understanding, not just physiology. And this is another thing that Katrina is working on too, is for doctors, if you go to a doctor in the West and you say, what should I do? They don't have my knee hurts. What should I do? I don't know. I have no idea. They just say, I'm going to give you a pill to numb the pain, or I'm going to send you to a PT. But most of the PTs, their model is pure structure and not any neuro connection to that structure. So they tend to fix what can be explained mechanically instead of, kinetically or in neuroscience, or combination of the two. And the Australians have already got a program in place that med students get a full year or a few semesters or whatever about this functional movement so they can be really meaningful partners in their patients as they get older, helping them to understand, use it or lose it doesn't just mean go pump iron until you look like Schwarzenegger. If you're into that, cool, but it's not the answer for most of us. So that's very exciting to me. The concerning thing is going to be obvious. I'm going to watch you nod your head when I say it, is these weight loss drugs. Right. And now it's getting even easier. Instead of having to inject it, which is needling is nervous, they can now take a pill. And that's really troublesome to me because, again, it reinforces I am separate. I'm judged by everything and everyone outside of me, and I'm competing with you. And if I don't see in the mirror what pop culture is telling me I should see, then I'm going to start taking things to force that rather than taking responsibility when possible, realizing that there are weight problems that are not a personal responsibility. I don't want to take that away from anybody. That is really concerning to me. And I know some people who don't need the drugs, but they're taking the drugs because they want to look a certain way. And they think that there's like a payoff, something really, truly humanly valuable about that perception on the other end of artificially losing X number of pounds. That's very concerning to me.
Wow. All right. So what or is there actually a connection between storytelling and healing?
Absolutely, man. Oh my God. Let's see if I can keep this brief. I do go on, Melvin. When you think about it, historically, biologically, creativity, which in this true early essence, right? Cave paintings, right? Expressing ourselves was about making sense of our world because early humans, we learned what we learned physically and in real time. We didn't have it installed like we do nowadays with our educational system. Storytelling, if all you do, and journaling is one of these methods for emotional well-being. If all you do is write a really bad poem that no one's ever going to see to process your own thoughts, you're going to be a little better off than you were before you did that. Now, if you then make it a habit to tell your stories so that you can share them with others, if only to have it reflected back to you, right? When I was on the road, I didn't do hotel motel. I lived outdoors most of the time. I lived in a van. And there was these people, they're called the rainbow gatherings. I don't know if you've heard of it. They look like 60s hippies. Lovely people, lots of tie-dye, lots of patchouli, lots of dreadlocks, lovely, delightful people. But they would gather in the thousands. And I don't know how they communicated where they were going to be next, but it traveled, and I would find them. And there was in the Ocala National Forest, there's like 4,000 of them. And I rendezvoused with the group and spent 10 days among them. But at night around the fire, even though these were kids mostly from well-to-do families that were checking out for a summer and finding themselves so much to their parents' chagrin, the storytelling that was going on around the fire and the co-regulation and the resonance when they told their stories, and they weren't making up stories, they were telling their story. And they were better at the end of the session because someone would reflect it back and say, oh man, I'm so sorry, or I'm so happy, whatever the case may be. So storytelling is so deeply linked to our nervous system. I always say to somebody, even if you do something incredible, like you climb Mount Everest all by yourself, there was no one there. If all you do is tell that story, someone wide-eyed, they're like, oh my God, you're telling all the details of this story. Okay, so now your story has had 2 lives. You experienced it. Now you're telling it. This person's nervous system is now jacked. There's endorphins going, they're excited, maybe a little adrenaline. And then the teller of the story gets to enjoy the reaction to that. That's co-regulation example through storytelling. We need to be telling stories about everything we do all the time, every day, especially if we're aware of an extreme emotion. And I don't just mean bad ones. In fact, I think the good ones make for better storytelling, right? Going back to my earlier observation about much of pop movies and television being a mirror instead of a lantern. Oh, look how bad his life is. Now mine seems good, right? If we tell the stories of the extreme good emotions, your mind, your nervous system doesn't know the difference between a real memory and one that you imagined, one that you experienced auditorially and visually, but didn't do yourself. It's stored in your neural pathways exactly the same way as if you really did it. So long story short, storytelling is deeply, intimately connected to all the brain chemicals in your body. And it turns on the co-regulation that many of us can't even say the word. We don't even know that it exists. Tell your stories, man.
Cool. So as a final question today, what's one thing you'd like to leave with the listeners as an action item?
Grab a piece of paper. Do this every day for a month, 10 minutes. That's how many minutes? Let's see, 30 days in a month, let's say. That's 300 minutes. We all have time for that. Write down your earliest memories of things that brought you joy. Don't go beyond 10 minutes, because if it interrupts the busy, competitive nature of our lives, lots of demands, especially if you're a parent, you're going to start to resent it. 10 minutes. The next day, do it the same time every day. Read it, reflect on it, write some stories about it, the whys, the details, because the first time you write it down, it's like, oh yeah, I remember. But then the next day, because you've reactivated that neural pathway, you're going to say, oh yes. And then this came from that. Because all our memory is, and all a story is a reconnection of old memories and connecting them back. And then they lead to something that oftentimes we didn't realize was there, or we forgot that was there. Do that for 30 days. I'm guaranteeing you, if you do it with love and sincerity and the desire to feel better, you're going to find a way to take whatever was in that 300 minutes of easeful effort. It's going to become something. It might be a book. Melvin, you just finished one. It might be a series of short stories. It might be a children's book. It's going to turn into something. And then what happens? Your story is being relived and reflected over and over and over again. That's my advice.
Great way to wind down the episode. So our guest today has been Mark Firehammer. Again, coolest last name ever. And he's the founder of the Creative Humanity Alliance. So Mark, thanks so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome, Melvin. I appreciate you having me and doing the work you do.
Thank you. So you can follow Mark's work, explore his wellness resources, and reflect on what feeling well means in your own life. The links will be in the show notes. That's it for this week's episode of Stories from Real Life. Until next time, don't forget to shine your light wherever you go.